Hi guys, welcome to Am Yisrael Thrive. I'm your host Shayna Netanya with
Jen, and this is where thriving is our resistance. And thank you for joining us again on this Sunday afternoon.
Exactly. And as we all know, it's been kind of a rough week. How you hanging in there, Jen?
Definitely feeling very emotionally drained from all of the, I would say, onslaught of different attacks around the world. Especially we have Michigan, we had 2 synagogues in Toronto that were shot at. A synagogue in Belgium was also attacked. I'm just seeing reports that there was a firebombing of a synagogue in Norway, and now there was another attack in Amsterdam.
Feels really overwhelming, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I concur. And I think at this point, I just feel so numb to it all. I feel like, especially since Bondi, it's just, there's been just an onslaught. It's been nonstop. Every single week, there's a new story that has just been collectively traumatizing all of us.
And what's scary is, I've studied, the Holocaust, and there are steps leading up to a genocide that we've seen in the Holocaust. And the first one is, classifying us versus them, and Zionists, that's the new slur, that's the new term to separate us, tagging us with, they use the Star of David, the upside down red triangle, being discriminated against. No Zionists are allowed here. We don't want Zionists in our restaurants, can't speak Hebrew. We don't want Israelis. We're coming to dehumanization, where it's okay for Jews to be attacked because they're subhuman, they're rats, we're animals. Or I've seen recently, we think that goys are cattle, so we deserve what we get. And what I'm afraid of is the next step, organization. And once organization starts happening, then we see more concerted violence, and that's what I'm afraid of. And where are people to say this is the line we can't cross?
Yep. And I completely concur. The organization part is the part that I'm most afraid of too, to the point to where I'm literally leaving this country. I genuinely believe it's going to happen. Everything that you just laid out is exactly what I see too, and it scares the living hell out of me. And every cell in my body that is programmed to survive is screaming, get out now while you still can.
And my grandparents were survivors, and growing up as a very young child, I thought, oh, why didn't my grandparents get out? How could they not see what's happening? How could they stay? And now, as someone, in my late 30s with a family, I can see why it is so difficult to make such hard decisions like this. And I guess for me, it's just baffling or just mind blowing to me that I'm actually kind of feeling or going through the same motions that my grandmother had to go through, or had to think of these things. And it's, to me, I'm speechless, I guess.
Yeah. In every generation, right? That's what I learned after my beating. When I saw my neighbors literally smiling as I looked into their eyes, crawling on the ground, bloody, after they just witnessed the Jew getting beaten by a gang of people in the street during daylight. And they smiled and they didn't help. It was then that I realized I am not seen as a human being. I am seen as an other. I am seen as an it. And this will continue until they kill me.
Mm-hmm. And I guess one of the roses that I want to lead into, because we can just get so dogged down in the sadness and just the depression and the sadness. I have to say, the online community, I had made a post several days ago, just saying, solidarity check. If you support the Jewish community, just comment something below. And we've got over 1,000 comments, and most of them, the majority of them, have been so supportive. Getting people saying from Iran, we support the Jewish community, from India, from Latin America, from all around, just supporting the Jewish community. And it just really helps ground me, knowing that there are people out there that really do support us, and just their voices aren't the loudest, because there are others who are screaming to be the loudest.
That's a really good point, because I've also seen Iranians themselves echoing the exact same sentiment that we have been for the last 2 years. Why is the West ignoring our voices?
And that brings me to another really great point. This was a roast for me, and I've shared this with others, because I know a lot of us have been just really sad. There is an account who used to be, a pro-Palestine, anti-Israel family in Iran. And ever since the Iranian massacre occurred in January, and seeing that the response has been very much lackluster from the West, from other groups, he actually made an apology video to the Jewish community. And I was just really blown away that here is somebody who owns up to what he has said in the past, and publicly is saying, like, here I am, I'm apologizing. I thought it was very sincere. And he said, you can accept, I hope you do accept it, but I understand if you do not. And I thought that had a lot of chutzpah. That also, gave me a lot of hope, that there are ways to build a peaceful community in the Middle East, and we can hopefully stop this terror.
Agreed. That does it takes a lot of chutzpah to admit one was wrong, especially in 2026, when everything is so divided by ideology, especially.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I did to take care of myself, so I'm going to say that this is my rose. For months now, I've been looking into paddle boards, because I envision this life in Netanya, Israel, of going out every day with my dog and my paddle board, and just like being able to have, that available to me whenever I want. What little people don't know is that I currently right now live on a lake. So I can easily do paddle boarding now if I want to. And so I finally pulled the trigger on buying myself a paddle board, and I'm going to start going out there and paddle boarding, at least on a weekly basis, so I can start getting used to it, getting in better shape, and getting my dog used to it too, on a nice, calm lake versus the open water.
I think that's amazing. And I have to give credit, because I've tried paddleboarding and I can't even get on the board itself. It's a lot of balance.
It is, which is why I did a lot of research into getting a nice wide one and stuff like that. That's really secure.
I'm just looking at, we do have some comments. We have Mikey on, Phyllis, we have Kazuza. Phyllis is just saying that your neighbors should have been appalled by anyone being beaten in the street. Again, I feel like that should be common knowledge. It's just human nature to have empathy. But I don't know if you noticed this, Shayna, but I see now whenever there's an issue happening, people just whip out their phones.
But a week before my beating, I had called a cop out there and filed a police report for harassment that had happened, right? And that was the first question that the cop had asked me is, why didn't you whip out your phone and film them in return, right? And I said this to him, I said, my phone costs like $1,000. If they start swinging at me, I don't want $1,000 phone to either get stolen or ruined, which is exactly what happened a week later when I got my ass beat. They stole my phone so that there wouldn't be no evidence. And when that exact same cop came to the scene at my beating, I literally said, now how do you like that? My phone got stolen as well. And when I said that, this motherfucker of an officer classified the hate, and I even said at the scene too, I want this classified as a hate crime. He classified it as a robbery. So this is why I also am like, don't expect the government or the cops or the system to support you as a Jew. in my experience, they won't do it.
And I want to say, I know probably things won't get done because they're inundated, but please, if anyone threatens you online, the FBI has an online tip line and it has hate crimes, and you can put in the information. And again, maybe something may come out of it, maybe not, but there's a record, and it's so easy to do, and it's online. And I've
I also want to
actually,
give a shout out to Stand By Us as well too, who also has a tip line, and they have personally called me back, and they have lawyers for you and stuff like that. So those are two great options.
Oh, that's great to know. I did not know about like them having lawyers as well. I think, okay, I'm going to reach out to them myself. But please report, no matter what, because if we're not reporting all of these things, then we can't change anything. And we need all of the documentation and data that we can get. And that leads me to Kazuza left a comment saying, we left South Africa as our safety was a question. Now in Toronto, we are feeling somewhat even more vulnerable. Can't keep running. Time is now to stand up and embrace our Jewish pride. So it kind of feels like that, those two sides of where Jews are standing. Like, some of us cannot run or we've already have, and we don't want to do it again, because of, outside factors and so on and so forth. But we need to take a stand. And also others are like, I need to go. And that's okay too. But this is what the Jewish community is facing right now.
Yeah. And I will say this too, for the Jews that choose to stay and stand behind and fight, wow, my heart is honestly with you. And that is a really brave choice. And it's a braver choice than I feel I'm making. I feel like it's scarier to stay behind where you could get fucking killed and to fight for your rights. I have Sue's, if you guys follow her. She and I had a really great exchange online on a comment section, and that's exactly what she said. She's like, I'm not going to be pushed out, and I'm not going to, this is my land too. I deserve to be here. Mm-hmm. And I can't deny that,
Mm-hmm. And that just brings me lastly, what I find really powerful as a Rose is that I've been seeing so many videos of, Israelis going into bomb shelters and being interviewed afterwards. There was one former, I want to see prime minister, he was being interviewed after there was a bomb strike, and he was like right outside where the crater was. And he was like, we're doing this and we don't mind dealing with this because we want the people of Iran to be free. And I thought, wow, like what a mindset that, they're willing to put up with constant sirens and bomb threats. And I've never been in that situation, so I really can't speak to how traumatizing that can be. But for many to say like, I'm willing to do this so that you can be free is just a testament to our resistance and our strength.
Yeah. Agreed. And talking about strength, we have a strong Soviet Jew on today. Okay. Our guest today we're so pleased to be joined by Dr. Naya Lekht, a leading scholar and educator on contemporary anti-Semitism and the founder of the organization Stop Antizionism and the host of the podcast Don't Know Much About. We're pleased to bring on Dr. Naya Lekht. Thank you for joining us today, Naya.
Hi. Hi, guys. I love how you introduced me as strong Soviet Jew. I love that.
One of my favorite things are Soviet Jews.
I never mess with a Soviet Jew, that's for sure. Or an Iranian Jew, or that's for
exactly. Sure. Mizrahim, Soviet Jews, like these are all the Jews that I look up to get my strength from. Because I'm like, what, if y'all can have gone through what you went through in those other countries, I can most certainly survive here in America.
Amazing. Love it.
Yeah.
Although I will say I didn't really I don't want to be a performative virtuer here. I did not go through Soviet anti-Zionism. That's my parents' story. Luckily, they brought me out and I grew up here.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for correcting us on that. So Naya, for those who may not be familiar with your work, you're a professor on anti-Zionism. And one of the things that you differentiate is that there is a difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism in 2026. Can you please tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. I will it's not that there's a difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism in 2026. There's just a difference in general. And to answer your question, I want to just backtrack a little to the year 2017. In the year 2017, I was teaching a class. I was living in Los Angeles in California, and I was teaching a class to seniors at a modern Orthodox Jewish day school. It was a seminar on anti-Semitism, and the way that I had structured the class, the final 2 weeks were really on anti-Zionism. And I remember that my students really couldn't understand why calling Israel an apartheid state, or why having like a dagger killing a Palestinian kid, with the hand being like of the IDF soldier. They didn't understand what I was talking about. They're like, that's not anti-Semitism. And I'm like, well, it's anti-Zionism. And they're like, well, that's not the same. And so there was a lot of confusion in the classroom. Now, right around that year, in the year 2017, the great Rabbi Jonathan Sacks delivered a lecture. And in his lecture, he said that anti-Semitism mutates. And it changes forms. Now, he was using the word anti-Semitism, what I would use today, Jew hatred. And we can come back to that because language is really important. But a lot of scholars in this field, they'll use the term anti-Semitism as like a broad term to mean all of the ways in which Jews have been hated in Europe, since Christianity, anti-Semitism. So he says that anti-Semitism has this capability of mutating. And I remember I was sitting, I was just thinking about that. I was like, that's a very powerful way of describing this really complicated form of hatred, that it has the capability of mutating. Because my point is that the new Jew hatred, it's not really anti-Semitism, it's anti-Zionism. Lest anyone think that I'm handing over to today's Jew haters, a permission slip to say, see, even the scholar on Jew hatred is saying that anti-Semitism is not the same as anti-Zionism. Wait a second. What I mean by this is that there are three dominant eras of Jew hatred. There's anti-Judaism, anti-Semitism, and anti-Zionism. And this is what Rabbi Jonathan Sacks actually was talking about. He said, look, the Jews were hated for their religion. That's anti-Judaism. Then then it evolved, this hatred. The Jews were hated for their race. That's anti-Semitism. Then we had another evolution, a mutation in this virus. He calls it a virus. They are hated for their nation state, and that is the land of Israel. And so when he said that, it really crystallized for me that this hatred has the capability of mutating. Now, why is it not like anti-Semitism? Because anti-Semitism constructs the Jew in a very different way that anti-Zionism will construct the Jew. Now, both of them want to create the Jew as the villain, but the way they're doing it is real different. So, for instance, in the second era of Jew hatred, anti-Semitism, the Jew is constructed as a race polluter, vermin, subhuman, but at the same time also tries to control the world. That's not the way the Jew is constructed today. That's not to say that there are people who don't believe these things. I'm sure there are. But the dominant way that Jew hatred manifests today is that Jews are actually violators of human rights. So how does one violate human rights? Well, genocide, colonization, apartheid, segregation, racism. So that is the new way that the Jew is constructed as a villain. And the reason I and many in this emerging field who are doing a lot of studying and talking about anti-Zionism, they're trying to drill a really important point, is that what's happening in the world today and the way that the Jew is being constructed as evil has very little to do with the way the Jew was constructed as evil during the Holocaust era. Israel is not portrayed as like a vermin, right? That's not the point. That's not what's happening. Israel is portrayed as a violator of today's morality, which is human rights. So today's, I don't want to be repetitive, but the point is that this is where you get into libels. What are the libels in each era, in anti-Judaism, anti-Semitism, and anti-Zionism? They're very different. So, for instance, the era of anti-Judaism, when, as Rabbi Jonathan Sacks says, we were hated for our religion, the libels were religious in nature. So we were Christ killers. We were committed blood libel. The libels in the era of anti-Semitism are race polluter libels, traitors. Jews are traitors. Jews want to control. They're globalists. Today's libels look very, very different. They're the colonizer libel, the apartheid, the genocide libel. I would add the racist libel. So Zionism is racism, as well as the ethnic cleansing libel, that Israel's entire creation was born on the sin of displacing an indigenous population. They all kind of like, they're an ecosystem of these libels that kind of rely upon one another. So again, to really, really clarify the point, it's that today's Jew hatred is anti-Zionism, and it's mutated from anti-Semitism. That is why I say they're not the same. But I don't want anyone to think that I'm giving basically a permission slip for today's Jew haters to go, well, see, she just said that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. Yeah, but that's because you don't understand the complex nature of this hatred.
Right. So it sounds like what you're basically saying is that Jew hatred basically mutates to reflect whatever the dominant culture's values are at the time.
Yes, thank you. Beautifully said. Yes.
I wanted to go back to, because you talked about how language is so important, and really talking about when Shayna and I are going to be, when we talk about the experiences that we deal with online, sometimes I will say this is an anti-Semitic remark, or I say this is anti-Zionist. So I'm just want to be very clear when I start talking about these experiences, when to use anti-Semitism versus anti-Zionism. It depends on what libel that they're spewing at that time to differentiate, but also to talk about, sorry, I'm going in a roundabout way. I've been also seeing discourse about how anti-Zionism is approached. Is it anti-Zionism one word, or is it anti-Zionism with a hyphen? I know it's a very niche thing, but I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on that part of the discourse.
Yeah, so I'll just say, I have one of my best friends. She's not a scholar, but just someone I speak to often. And she kind of makes fun of me. She's like, listen, Naya, you're not going to save the world because of a hyphen. Like, drop that whole thing. No pun intended, like, drop the hyphen. She's like, she makes fun of me. She's like, but the truth is, I want to take this seriously, though. When you're talking about culture, and when you're talking about shaping people's understanding of this new way of hating Jews, there is a significance within that hyphen. It is very important. So, for instance, when you use the anti-Zionism with a hyphen, you are basically talking about opposition to Zionism as an idea or an ideology. When you drop the hyphen, what you're describing is a hate movement, because the person who hates the Jew constructs an image or an idea of a Jew that's not rooted in reality. So let's go back to the word anti-Semitism. FYI, there was also a debate with that. Do we drop the hyphen? Do we not drop the hyphen? Scholars and journalists, not all, by the way, there are still those who will use hyphen anti-Semitism. But when you use the hyphen, you're basically saying it's in opposition to this idea, which is Zionism. But that is, those people don't understand how the Jew hater functions. For the Jew hater, they're always constructing an image, an idea of a Jew that's not rooted in reality. So, for instance, in the era of anti-Semitism, it's not that they were criticizing Jews. They hated the Jew. They created a demon out of a Jew. The people who are anti-Zionist without a hyphen, they could care less what Zionism actually means. They actually don't know what it means. They're constructing a demon. Their Zionism for them is racism, it's genocide. So I always say that anti-Zionism is not opposition to Zionism, it's demonization of Zionism. That's what's happening. So when you are talking about anti-Zionism with a hyphen, you are basically giving, you're ceding the ground, the battlefield to the real haters, because you're saying it's opposition to Zionism, it's critique of Zionism. That's not what's happening. It's a full-on totalizing anti-Jewish hate movement that constructs out of the Jew this boogeyman, this Zionist. So that's why we dropped that hyphen. Okay, do you have any questions? Because there's another reason as well.
Please continue.
No, because it's not so simple. There's another more complicated reason for both keeping actually the hyphen and not. And that has to do with Jews who are anti-Zionists. Okay, so there are pre the state of Israel. So before the state of Israel was reestablished, there was a robust debate within the Jewish world. Like, what do we do? Obviously, anti-Semitism, and I'm using that word because that was anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism was surging. It was at levels that were, there was the Kishinev pogrom, there were waves of pogroms, there's the Dreyfus affair, both the Eastern Europe and Western Europe. It's obvious that Jews are not welcome. And so there's this kind of conversation. What do we do as Jewish people? So there were these Jews, they were part of the Bund, okay? These were more like socialist Jews. And they didn't think that recreating or going back and creating a national homeland for the Jewish people was a good idea. They believed in something called Hierness, in Yiddish, Doigkeit, which is Hierness. They believed, why should we go anywhere? This is where we belong. We have had our roots here for many years. We don't want Zionism. They were hyphen Zionism. They were in opposition to the ideology, truthfully. But there's a very different conversation for Jews who today, after the state of Israel has already been created, to participate in that conversation. It's like they're living in 1921 or 1903 or 1908. I'm sorry to tell them, like it's 2026. Israel exists. That debate has already been had. And what they don't understand is that they kind of lionize the diaspora, that we should stay in the diaspora, but they're also contributing to the hate movement, which is anti-Zionism. So when we keep the hyphen, that I keep for Jews before 1948, who were seriously like, they were in opposition to the state of Israel. You know, I'll give you another good analogy. This one's not mine. This is from the great Professor Ruth Weiss of Yiddish literature. She said to an audience once, she said, imagine a young couple who just got married and they're thinking, should we have a child? Should we not have a child? So like they do a pro and con. They take a piece of paper out. It's too expensive. We want to travel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Now she says, imagine that same couple with their child who's in third grade in the bedroom sleeping, talking about whether it's a good idea to have the child. That basically are the Jews who participate in anti-Zionism. These are the Shaul Magids. This is a professor who are still stuck in this pre-1948 model of like, is it a good thing for Jews to have? It's like tafsik. It's happened. Israel has been reestablished, right? So they are actually contributing, perhaps even inadvertently, to much confusion. Because if I'm not Jewish, I'm looking at the Jewish community, these anti-Zionist Jews, right, who are like, no, we should stay in the diaspora. Israel is not our homeland. What are you talking about? It already exists. Like the conversation has already been had. So I just wanted to explain that.
Thank you. Thank you. And I've also noticed it's something too with the anti-Zionist hate movement that exists today is that they'll have these sort of token Jews, the anti-Zionist Jews, a lot of them like the Netanya Lekht, you know, the celebrities that are Jewish that will speak out against the Jewish state. But then I also see that they get cannibalized by the movement itself. There was, I can't remember the actress anymore, but she was an actress that was in something. And because she got like cast as like a Mexican, and she's part Mexican too, then she was removed.
About,
you know what I'm talking about, Jen?
I don't remember her name.
Odessa, Zion, something
That's
like
it.
that is her name.
Yes. Yeah, and they cannibalized her in return. And can you remember the reason why they did that, Jen?
She was playing a Mexican, and she doesn't have Mexican ancestry, but she was Jewish. So they hired somebody with Mexican ancestry, but not Jewish. So that's kind of like the whole controversy of which identity was supposed to be more than the other. It became a whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but I remember her going online and basically, I would never be a Zio, I'm Jewish and stuff like that. But they betrayed themselves because they ultimately like firebombing synagogues and stuff like that, trying to ram your car into a synagogue because apparently your Hezbollah affiliated family was killed in an Israeli airstrike is totally okay by the new left and the new anti-Zionists in America. What are your thoughts on that, Naya?
Well, let me, I just really think this hyphen conversation is extremely important, even though my friend makes fun of me all the time, my best friend. Um, I was in a debate with a very smart woman the other week, a very smart woman. She's quite brilliant. And she was really like, why do I need to drop the hyphen? And I was explaining to her. And so I want to reiterate it. I said, look, if you keep the hyphen, you are allowing them to say that anti-Zionism is just an opposition and a criticism of Zionism. That dash, that little dash does so much heavy lifting for the haters because it provides the cover for them to say, we're against this idea of Zionism. We don't like it. We want to criticize it. But when you remove the hyphen and you put it as one word, you're really describing an entire ideology that's rooted in constructing Jews as demons. So I just want to really reiterate that again. Now, regarding the anti-Zionist Jews, there are two types. There's the anti-Zionist Jews with a hyphen who, I don't know, still live in the year 1903, okay, who somehow got stuck back there. That let's leave them behind. There are anti-Zionist Jews without a hyphen who actually are like you said, the Natura Karti, but also the if not now Jew, if not now anti-Zionists, JVP anti-Zionists, Peter Beinart anti-Zionists.
Like a Mandy Patinkin kind
Yes,
of.
they're the ones who are deploying the libels like colonizer, like apartheid, like a race, like Israel's a racist regime, Israel's a Nazi regime, Israel was born in sin. These are very dangerous. And I get a lot of questions all the time. Well, what do we do with these people? What do we do with these people? Because when you go to like court and you testify before Congress, the Congress will of course bring that, people call it the token Jew, who'll say, actually, anti-Zionism is not a form of hatred, it's free speech. And I want to just explain something to everyone here today. There are Jews who don't wear kippot. In fact, most Jews in America do not. Most Jews in America, whether we like it or not, do not observe the Shabbat to its fullest. Most Jews in America are not religious. They're very secular. However, we all know that if you go and target a boy because he's wearing a kippah, hit him, take off his kippah and spit on it, everyone knows that's Jew hatred or anti-Semitism, even though a majority of Jews don't wear kippahs. So I don't care that we have this minority of Jews who say that anti-Zion, it doesn't matter to me. What matters is what is Jewish identity? And Jewish identity is a triangle. It's not my idea. It's Rabbi Soloveitchik, it's Micah Goodman, it's Gil Troy. These are people way beyond my, professional status. And they have said many, many times that Jewish identity rests on Eretz Yisrael, Torat Yisrael, Am Yisrael. So for English people, the land of Israel, the people of Israel, and the Torah that the people of Israel hold. You desecrate the Torah, you desecrate the Jewish people. You desecrate the land of Israel, you desecrate the Jewish people. You desecrate us and deny our nationhood, that we are a people like Tucker Carlson, who, by the way, a few weeks ago sits down with Mike Huckabee and asks, well, how do we know that the Jews living in Israel today are the real Jews? Who are the real Jews? How do we know? Like, they should take a DNA test. So like Hitler wanted us to take a DNA test to kill us, and he wants to take a DNA test to erase our existence. So I don't care really that there are anti-Zionist Jews. Yes, it's a problem. I get it. But we should not get sidetracked by their existence. Most Jews don't celebrate Shabbat. Most Jews do not read from the Torah twice a week. But if you desecrate the Torah, it's anti-Semitism.
And I think this goes with a lot of people have a lot of misunderstanding or do not know the history. And I'm sure you've combat a lot of misinformation. And this kind of goes with, you recently co-wrote about how Holocaust education can actually obscure anti-Semitism if it teaches Jews as only like a powerless victim. What can we do to have like a better or stronger Holocaust education so that there won't be as much misinformation now, or more information about what's going on in the Middle East? What can we do to have more education for our students, or those, Jewish and non-Jewish alike, in our schools?
I mean, it's not an answer you may like, but I mean, it's going to sound terrible what I'm about to say. Let me preface by saying my grandfather's a Holocaust survivor. My dissertation was on the Holocaust on Babi Yar. I understand how important it is to teach about it. I understand how important it is to preserve the memory, but the way that it has been done has been so detrimental and damaging to the Jewish community. I say focus on living Jews more and dead Jews less. Right? We have living Jews in Israel. Study them, learn about them. These are the Jews with power, and that's okay. That's the other thing, is that in our world, in our zeitgeist, we're kind of marinating, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, oppressor versus oppressed. Oh, okay, those with power, they're the oppressor. Those without power, they're the oppressed. Okay, can't deny Israel does have power, right? It has a stronger GDP. It has an army. It's got America backing. It's strong. Okay, it's thriving. I'm proud of it. That's the thing, is that when we teach the Holocaust, only sympathize with Jews when they're behind barbed wires, that's going to be a problem, right? You're producing, unfortunately, a kind of framework of, well, you can only sympathize or empathize with the people if they're oppressed. Why? Why can you only sympathize with the people when they're oppressed?
What I find also really interesting too is the side that typically tends to use that argument and feels that way. They will also side with strong aggressors that they will try to then recast as the victim somehow. I feel like we're seeing that with Iran. They're taking the IRGC, which is a fascistic regime, and saying that they back them because of U.S. quote empire.
But you know why that is? Because everything, it goes back to, again, that oppressor oppressed. They have coded the world into white versus brown. And the brown, whether that's Iranians or the brown people, whether they're Black, they're the noble savages. They have been oppressed by the West, by the white man. So, who cares that they're oppressing their own people? They are the oppressed, and that's it. It's flattening our critical thinking, and that's about it. Here's another thing, because Jen, you asked about Holocaust education, and you said, well, how can we do it better? I'm not saying don't teach about the Holocaust, but we definitely need to do it better. One way to do Holocaust education better is to talk less about, it's so terrible what I'm saying, but talk less about Jews in gas chambers and talk more about the demonization that the Nazis, like, what did that look like? I always ask my students, when did Hitler come to power? 1933. When did the systematic murder of Jews? 41. So what was happening between 33 to 41? Well, what was happening was a cycle of libels, right? And so our students don't even know the word libels. Forget like young students, adults don't even know that word, okay? They need to understand how disinformation works, how propaganda works, and what was happening for those 8 years. That really should be a lesson on the Holocaust. Less so kind of the victim. Tell the story of the victims, but how did they get to be victims? I always ask myself, see, my dissertation was on Babi Yar. Babi Yar is a ravine outside of Kiev in Ukraine where they shot about 33,000 Jews within 2 or 3 days. And I always asked myself for years, like, how does somebody wake up and say, oh, I'm going to go shoot Jews? Like, how do you get to that place? You get to that place because you have to keep on just saying, Jews are vermin, Jews are vermin, Jews don't belong here, Jews are trying to take over Ukraine or Russia, Jews are siding with with the Germans, which is a crazy thing to say, but you keep on saying these things on a loop over and over and over, and you really indoctrinate people. So yeah, you should teach about the Holocaust, but teach about the Holocaust in a way that teaches about the perpetrator. Put the spotlight on the perpetrator and less so much on the victim. We've been telling the stories of the victims, and that's lovely and that's important, but we haven't told the stories of the perpetrators. Like, what were they doing? What did they gain from the libels that they deployed. Here's another thing that I want to say, which is something that has inspired me from listening to Dara Horn. In general, when we want to create education about Jew hatred, whether it's anti-Judaism, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, there's been this within like middle schools, mostly in elementary schools, like anti-bullying, like learning to love. Jews are like everyone else. But they're not like everyone else. And Dara Horn says, actually, Jews spent 3,000 years being not like everyone else. Also, why do we have to only accept people if they're like us? That's a bad lesson, isn't it? That's counterproductive. We have to accept people who are actually different, not because like they're like us. We don't have to love people X because they're like us. No, we love people because they're made in the image of God. They're holy, whatever, they're human life. So there's a lot of lessons that need to be rethought when we talk about teaching about the Holocaust. But once again, there are Jews who are alive and thriving. Teach about them.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially when we take a look at the culture of America, which claims to really support a diverse population, but will then do exactly what you just said. Well, you're not like us. And so it becomes a little bit mind-boggling. Because you are so educated on the histories of what Jews in the diaspora faced, especially in Europe, what parallels and what are your predictions for what's going to happen here in America with what we're seeing, this trend?
Well, you're speaking to someone who's got some like Russian blood, I guess. Not really, but like Russian culture, I would say. Everything's a little bit doom and gloom for me. I think that anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, whatever you want to call it, functions. There are pull and push factors. So in terms of look at after October 7th, Bret Stephens talks about the October 8th Jew. Look at all these Jews. Like, what's the silver lining in all of this? Is look at all these Jews who've actually leaned into their Jewishness. Like, I'm in New York now. Every Jewish woman is like, even myself, like 300, hi, Magen David, like everything you can possibly think of. Everybody's like, I'm going to this Jewish event and I'm going to that Jewish event. So Jew hatred has this ability to move the Jews actually towards being Jewish. And perhaps I'm not a rabbi, but perhaps Hashem wants us to be together. And he looks and he goes, do I need to inject a little of a Jew hatred for the Jews to remember who they are? So that's kind of like the positive angle of all this, is I see all these Jews being Jewish in their own ways, but at least being Jewish. The negative in all this is, unfortunately, it's a pattern in history. When this Jew hatred is unmanageable. And I was listening to your intro when you guys were speaking, just like last week, just the amount of synagogues, the amount of, attacks. You didn't no, I'm not criticizing you, but even the amount of attack, forget synagogues, Jews in New York accosted, being called Zionists, kicked, hit, what happened in San Jose. In San Jose just last week, this young guy sitting at a fancy restaurant, he's speaking Hebrew, he gets attacked out of nowhere. They start attacking him, screaming, "Dirty Jew." So the writing on the wall is not great. And what I'm telling you, and this is what Shayna said, is she feels like we're going to have to move, we're going to have to leave. And I do feel very similarly. I feel that we have become tolerant of the intolerant. We've allowed a population who is anti-Zionist, who is anti-Western, who is thriving here. We've got a mayor, Mamdani, who is just a full-on raging anti-Zionist, and he loves by the way, he loves the question when a reporter asks him, can you please comment, what are you doing to fight anti-Semitism? That's the best question you can ask him, because he's going to immediately say he denounces anti-Semitism, because he does. He loves the Jews with bagels. He loves the Jews who go and light Hanukkah candles, because he has no clue that Hanukkah is the most like Zionist holiday. But he loves those kinds of Jews. And so he's going to denounce anti-Semitism. He loves that question. What reporters should be asking him is, what are you doing about anti-Zionism? About Jews who are being marked as Zionists in order to harm them? That's the kind of question he needs to get, but nobody's asking him that question. He's getting the softball. What are you doing to make sure that anti-Semitism is not, raging? Oh, I denounce anti-Semitism, right? I call him the keep the bagels. He's like, to the Jews, keep your bagels, throw out your state, your country kind of man. So I can't really give you a prediction because we're in America is a unique country, unlike any other country. But if you know the pattern of Jewish history, it's not good. It's not good, and I worry, and I do think often that we might have to leave. Yeah.
So for those of us that are staying, or we still have a lot of things to work out here. A lot of us feel politically homeless, especially with this anti-Zionist movement, especially how it's been creeping into the Democratic Party. I know I used to be very liberal, progressive. I still hold those values. I still hold those social values. But when it comes to foreign policy, I feel very isolated. I know a lot of other Jews feel that way. What do you recommend for those, for us in the elections? What do you recommend that we do? Who do we support?
I've always been, Jen, I'm a very for all my education, I'm a real simple gal. I'm a horse with these blinders and I don't see anything else. I only see what's good for my people. Ironically enough, though, what's good for the Jews is good for civilization because I know why we are here on this earth. I know that Jew hatred, and when it appears, is one of those alarms that goes off. So for me, whenever I go into elections in general, I always think about what is good for Jews and what is good for America. For instance, I do believe that strong borders are good for America. I really believe that is, and it's good. It's an important thing to make sure that our borders are strong. It's good that we are very, very serious about people who have come here with very bad intentions to do.
Yeah, a lot of the people that we're seeing now that are like from these Iranian cells got in through the southern border.
So, I mean, that's where I'm at. For me, it's like very simple, and people, call me a one issue, voter, whatever. I don't care, or nationalistic, particularistic, myopic, whatever people call me. But studying history, I know, and this is not meant to say like Jews are on some high pedestal, but I do know that when Jews are harmed, this is the first sign of a society that's going downhill. So what's good so if that's the case, then the inverse is also the case, that what is good for Jews will be good for the civilization as well.
Great. And you also started an organization called Stop Anti-Zionism. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so look, I was really hesitant. How many Jewish organizations are there? They say it's like the alphabet. They call them the alphabet. I'm sure that there's, even for the letter A, there's like 70 duplications of A. Okay. I've been very, 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 what's the good word here? I've been very angry, and I've been very resentful with the inaction of Jewish organizations when it comes to anti-Zionism. And please understand, I'm not being critical. I'm not an October 8th Jew. I've been doing this since 2002. I've been ringing these alarm bells for so long, and I almost gave up. I really did. And then October 8th happened, and I saw what we just talked about, kind of the American Jewish community had a sort of reinvigorated to see that this is a problem. And I thought, okay, after October 8th, surely the Jewish organizations would definitely take anti-Zionism now seriously, because that's what we're dealing with. And nothing. And so I've been very, very upset. And so I was like, well, what do I do here? And I got connected with a woman in Canada who was we co-founded it together. And she was telling me what's happening in Canada, and I couldn't believe it. Apparently, it's even worse than us. It's even worse there.
We just got a comment from We Get It Done with Joy saying we are in big trouble in Canada. So that's just from one of our viewers.
When she told me, yeah. So I was like, oh, no. Canada's not so bad. You guys are like, Canadians are just jolly. And, you know, I always see, but no, she was telling me, and other people who I got connected to were like, no, if you guys, you need to see what's happening in Canada, because it could be you guys in like half a year to a year. And so we just decided, why not? Why not start something? But for us, starting meant we had this idea that we wanted to launch a declaration. So we wrote a declaration on anti-Zionism. What is anti-Zionism? We wanted the Jewish organizations to sign on. And I want to just give a quick backstory about that. A couple months ago, Stand With Us lost a case against MIT. Stand With Us was representing a few Jewish students for the harassment that these Jewish students were experiencing at MIT, anti-Zionist harassment. So the judge published about 56-page document of this, and it went to the First Circuit Court. And on page 30, the judge lists all these reasons why he decided to dismiss the case. And he says, well, since there's no consensus in the Jewish community that anti-Zionism is a form of Jew hatred, he says, is anti-Semitism fine? He said that. And you know what? I can't even be angry at that judge, because you know what? There isn't a consensus. There isn't a consensus. Go on any website right now, AJC, ADL, UJA, JCRC, Stand With, like all these, and look up how they talk about, we don't have a shared language of how we talk about anti-Zionism. A couple of weeks ago, a reporter reached out to me and said, oh, is there a standard definition for anti-Zionism? And I said, no, there isn't. There isn't. And that's why we decided, you know what? Why don't we create this declaration, which we're going to, we have many plans what we want to do with it, but this will be this declaration that actually provides a definition for what is anti-Zionism, introduces the population to the idea of the three eras of hatred, Jew hatred. And then if we can get Jewish organizations to sign, well, then no judge in the future will say there's no consensus. So we got Stand With Us to sign. We got UJA of Toronto to sign. We have Navi. We've got JNF. We've got a lot of grassroots organizations that signed, and Jew hatred signed as well. A Lawfare Project signed. So we have a lot of amazing organizations that signed, and we've even spoken with Natan Sharansky. He gave us a lot of feedback. We were, it went through various drafts of, like, it was a lot of work thinking through, because the other thing is people think about IRA definition and they're like, oh, does this compete with IRA? No, it doesn't. Actually, IRA is really important. This is an extension from IRA. But so that is one of the things that we have kind of anchored ourselves in, is this declaration. And we, I'm using this time with you guys today to basically ask people to go to www.stopaz.org, click on declaration, scroll down and sign it. And you could see all the organizations that have already joined. We put it on our website. And the second amazing thing is that we, together with another Canadian Jewish organization called Tafsik, have decided to put on a symposium, the first ever, to address anti-Zionism. And that will happen in the month of May. So very, very soon. And our first speaker is Ben Shapiro. That's kind of bold, but that's what we decided. We decided, because here's the thing, Jen and Shayna, as there's a problem on the left in America right now, there's a huge problem of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism on the right.
I've noticed it too. I was really kind of surprised to see it start popping up, because I feel like we're so ideologically sort of siloed. And for a long time, I was a leftist for a long time. And that was one of the things that, like, there was always, like, you didn't want to get compared to one another. And so I was kind of shocked to see people on the right start echoing the same language I heard on the left.
Yes. So that's when I know, by the way, to your earlier question, where are we going? If before we had the right that was balancing and kind of being the strong, like the front that was able to kind of be the pro-Israel or pro-Jewish, I'm worried about the right. I'm really worried about where they're going. And here's the thing. We don't have time for this, but if we look at what happened to the Democratic Party, it wasn't overnight. It starts with the fringe. But if the Democrats are not going to call out the fringe will move. So what's happening on the right now is the fringe. If you're not going to call out the right, it's going to take over the right. Now, Ben Shapiro went to, I think he went to a Young Republican conference. I don't remember where, but he called them out. Yeah, so that's great, except he's also Jewish. So of course, they're like, well, of course you called out the right because you've got a Jewish agenda going on. So what we really need on the right is we need somebody who's not Jewish calling out the right.
And I feel like we had that with Charlie Kirk, and then they assassinated Charlie Kirk, right?
That's right. I mean, we have a few people, but not. We need like Marco Rubio. Yeah. But he needs to be more vocal. This is the time that the leadership needs. JD Vance is a big problem. He's not going to call them out at all because he's looking for political expediency. And for him, he'll go and join the anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism movement if that's going to get him into the White House. And that's dangerous.
And that's what I've noticed too a lot with with MAGA. So MAGA is very much into no foreign wars and stuff like that, which is why they're against, us going into Iran. But I can't get why anybody would be against going into Iran just based on what Iran has done to its own people.
Because Jew hatred is a virus, and once it infects the brain, you can't think straight. So within the right, where you call MAGA movement, there's a big fracture. There are those who are like America first. They're isolationists. They're not. It's because it's Israel.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's Israel. But if it was like Venezuela, they wouldn't be America first. I know exactly what's happening there. But what's happening is that I think they're the majority on the right, are just silent. Why are they silent? And this is the big problem. If we don't have somebody on the right who's going to call out the fringe, I really worry that it's going to basically engulf the right. Which brings us back to your question earlier, like, where do we go? If we don't have a right and we don't have a left, we're politically homeless. Forget politically homeless. We're like, our safety is in jeopardy.
It just brings so my grandmother was in Lithuania. So, it's part of the Soviet bloc, but, they had to face having the Soviets invade Lithuania and having to deal with that ideology on the left. And then the Nazis came, having to deal with the right ideology. And then the Soviets came back. So it's just, you're in this, I read this really great book about, about Ukraine specifically, they're right in the middle between these two opposing ideologies. And they keep going, they're the ones that have to deal with all of the backlash from both sides and trying to survive. And I just feel like that's just maybe something that's going to happen here. I see,
it's an unprecedented time for American Jews. If American Jews before were like, well, at least we have this party, at least we have that party, I don't know where we're at right now. And that is a problem. That really is a problem.
Yeah. And well, I thank you for your honesty, Naya. And I thank you really for joining us today. Where can people go to see you speak next?
Well, I am going to be speaking with the senior legal counsel at End Jew Hatred on March 26th.
Wow.
So I'm having a webinar. I'm also having another webinar through the High Mitzvah Scholar Circle on March 24th, Tuesday, where I will be doing a deep dive into the history of Soviet anti-Zionism, kind of tracing the genealogy of this movement.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for that. We're going to be collabing all of our clips with Naya and Stop Anti-Zionism so that you can just click on any of our posts with them and go directly to their Instagram profiles. So then you can then find them easily, like for their websites and things like that. I want to thank you so much for joining us today, Naya. And thank you all for joining us today out there in the rest of the world. I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves and you have a great week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.